Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Edufy for another session with me for learning grammar. My name is Electoli, Faculty of English at Edufy Institute, and today we're going to talk about a very important topic that is cases of nouns and pronouns. What are the cases of nouns and pronouns, you might ask me? So there's two very important cases, that is nominative and objective cases. When we talk about nouns, right? When we talk about nouns in a sentence, we must always understand that nouns come as a subject or an object in a sentence. So basically, nominative and objective cases refers to whether it's a subject or whether it's an object. Why and how do we use noun in an objective case? How do we use a noun in a subjective case? One thing that you will always have to remember when we talk about subject and object is that subjects are always what we talk about or who we talk about in a sentence. That means they are the ones that will be performing the actions. The actions being performed will be directly related to the subject. However, if something or someone is receiving the action, we consider them the objects in a sentence. Therefore, they are also considered the objective case. So let's start from the very beginning about noun cases. Noun case refers to the grammatical role a noun is playing in a sentence. What does this mean? That means in a sentence, if an object or if a subject is performing the action, right? Which one is performing the action or which one is receiving the action? That is called the noun case. And we will be able to understand the meaning of the sentence completely if we are able to denote them whether they are in the objective case or in the subjective case. Let's take a look at this. A noun in the nominative case is serving as the subject of the sentence. That means the entity, which whether it's a person, thing, or anything that we talk about in a sentence, if that entity is performing the action, we consider them the subjective case. And that subjective case is understood as the nominative case. The dog chased the cat. In this sentence, what do we find? We find that the dog is chasing the cat. Who is performing the action? The dog. So we know, therefore, the performer of the action is the subject, right? So this is understood as the nominative case. The subject will be understood in nouns, especially when the noun has been mentioned directly in the sentence. We know that this is the subject, so therefore it will be always in the nominative case. But when we look at the other part of the sentence, the dog chased the cat. Here, another noun has been mentioned, but here the cat is not performing the action, it is receiving the action. So, therefore, it becomes an object. Object means the objective case. So this is very clear in all sentences where you have nouns. That means what is a nominative noun? Nominative noun is the subject of the sentence. What is an objective case? We see that it's an objective, that it's a noun that performs as an objective, and they will be understood as the objective case. And we will have to always remember this. Whenever we talk about verbs, that is this one, actions, whether it is being transferred to something else or whether something is receiving that action, will be understood as the object in any sentence. This is very clear and simple. If we look at this, conversely, a noun in the object here, if we look at this same example again, they are talking about how the dog is performing the action of chasing and it is being received by the cat. So therefore, this is the nominative case and this is the objective case. It's very simple when it comes to nouns. However, there is a little bit more complication when it comes to pronouns. That means when we use nominative and objective case in pronouns, there is a lot of confusion that happens along with it. So let's understand the basic idea of what pronouns are. Things get more complicated when a pronoun rather than a noun is serving as the subject or object of a sentence. So what is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that stands in for a noun. any replacement that we use instead of a noun, it is understood as a pronoun. I believe we all have heard of pronouns such as I, he, me, she, they, them, us, right? So which is the correct usage in a sentence? When do I use I? When do I use me? That is what we're going to talk about. And that will be understood only through one thing, and that is nominative and objective case. Let's take a look at this one. Nominative case I will become me when we talk about objective case. Similarly, he becomes him, she becomes her, we become us. Now, this change is only happening when we see that there is a change in the function of that word, that is the pronoun. If it is performing as a subject, then we use I. But if it is performing as an object, I am going to use me. So pronouns, it's very simple in this matter. It is very simple in the case that when we have subject and we're using a pronoun in that very subject, we use this nominative case. But if we're using pronouns in the object as an object, then we're going to use them in the objective case. So let's take a look. We often use different pronouns depending on whether the pronoun is serving as the subject. So if it's serving as the subject, we will consider them the nominative case. If we're using the pronouns as an object, then we will be using the objective case. For example, I will be used in the subject form, right? But then if I have to use this I talking about myself in the objective form, then I will have to use me. So it's very simple in that case, okay? So let's look forward. We would use I when we want to write about the subject. For example, I went to the park. So here, what do we find? I here. This is a pronoun replacing someone in the sentence. Okay, no proper names has been given, and instead of a proper noun, I have used the pronoun to replace someone or something. So I went to the park. Here has been written. Why did I write I instead of me? Because both of this has the same meaning, right? But why did I use I? Because it is in the subject form. If it is in the subject form, then it will be I. That is the nominative case. And why is this a subject and not an object? Because this one is performing the action. I went to the park. That means I am performing the action, right? So the performer of the action will always be the subject. So therefore, I went to the park means this one is the subject, and therefore this we will use I because it's the nominative case. Similarly, if we move on, when do we use me? My sister called me. I can write sometimes, if we think about it, I'm talking about me, myself, and I, right? So my sister called I. A lot of people confused there as well. Why didn't I write I and just me, right? So we write me because I am receiving the action, not performing the action. Performer of the action is my sister, right? So you can write she in place of this one, but you cannot write me here because me is the one that is receiving the action. My sister called me. So the receiver of the action becomes the object and therefore the objective case of a pronoun. This is very simple. And we have similar examples here. If it is written here, she called me, it is correct. But then if I have to write she here, it will be incorrect. My sister called she cannot be correct. Why? Because this is the nominative case. What do you do if you want to write this in the objective case? You will find it here. So my sister called her and not she, right? So that is the main difference. She and her means the same thing. They have the same meaning. But the only difference is that The usage, if it is used as a subject, you will have to write she. But if the pronoun is used as an object, you will have to write her. That is called the nominative and objective case. It's very simple. If you move on to the next example, you will also find this: they and them, right? They is used to talk about a group of people, not just a single one. Let's take an example of this one. Chris invited them to dinner. Here is who is the subject in this sentence. If you look carefully, is it Chris or is it them? Who is performing the function? Chris, right? So Chris is the subject. That means the receiver of the action in this sentence is this pronoun them, and therefore they are the object. Why didn't I use they? Because it's in the object form, therefore I will use the objective case. If I am going to write them here in this sentence, it will be incorrect because since this is the objective case, right? But if I write they invited them, that will be correct because here they is the subjective case of pronoun. So if you understand this properly, you will be able to understand which type of pronouns to use in the sentence. They and them mean the same thing. They are used to denote third person, which are plural in nature, right? Plural nouns, when we are going to talk about a group of people, more than two people, we use the pronoun they or them, right? But what is the usage? The usage is that in the subjective case, you will use they, but then in the objective case, you will use them. So subjective means nominative and objective means objects. So subject, they will become them in the object. So if you look at this table also, he, if you're writing about a friend, let's say, okay, he asked him for a favor. This is correct, right? So a lot of times what you'll find here is that whenever we have the subject, we will use the nominative case he and she. Okay? But if you have an object, then you will use the objective case him or her. So he asked him is the correct answer because he is the one performing the action and the action is being received by him. So the main cases of this, when we talk about cases, is that you will have to understand which is the subject in this sentence. If the performer or if the person or entity that we're talking about is the subject, which form of the pronoun do I use? I will use the nominative case. If the topic or the person that we're talking about is an object, then what do? We will write them in the objective case. Now, this is the correct usage of nominative and objective case. We will further on move along other parts of this very cases topic in our next class. So hope you will join me again. Have a very nice day.